Hi everyone, my name is Joel and I am a playwright and artist in residence here at PLAYWRIGHTS, and I'd love to welcome all of you to PLAYWRIGHTS, a PLAYWRIGHTS podcast. This is a new podcast series that we're starting where we sit down with playwrights whose work we're presenting in our theatre and have super fun and in-depth chats with them about the things that inspire them, motivate them, and more generally, inform them as they're writing their plays. And this is because we want this to be a super fun and accessible resource for playwrights in our community, or in general, anybody who wants to find out a little bit more about what it takes to write a play, what goes on in the writer's head as they're solving problems, but also experiencing all the highs and lows of making a play happen. Today, we are joined by a very special playwright whose play we are staging in the theatre in March. I won't say too much about it right now. I think you can guess. But it just leaves me to welcome my very good friend, the wonderful playwright, Thomas Lim.
Hi, Joel.
Hi, Thomas.
Hello.
Fancy seeing you here.
Yeah, and I brought you something.
Oh, you did?
Yes, I did. 新年
Oh,
快乐.
恭喜发财, 恭喜发财, 恭喜发财. We are, in fact, recording this after Chinese New
Yes,
Year,
we
so
are.
This is very anachronistic. For those of us who cannot see what just happened, Thomas just cycled into the space, and that's because we are recording in the PLAYWRIGHTS studio,
Yes.
where we are currently rehearsing.
Red Riding Hood.
Why is there a bike?
Because she's riding throughout the
That's
play.
so funny.
Yeah, and it's got something to do with.
I always wondered
yeah.
about the riding in Red Riding Hood, because in the stories, like, she's not riding a horse or anything, right?
No, she's not, but she wears a riding. The hood is meant for riding.
Yeah, right.
But she just skips through the forest.
But so now she's riding throughout the show.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
kinetic. I love it.
And there's a journey to getting her training wheels off.
That is very funny.
Yeah.
I can't ride a bike.
Oh no.
Yeah,
we should teach you the bike's here.
Should I come and watch this show?
Yes, you should.
It will inspire me to ride a bike.
Yeah.
So we are recording this episode in the PLAYWRIGHTS studio, which is where we rehearse our plays, but it's also a performance space. So is Red Riding Hood happening in the downstairs, or is it happening here? It's happening downstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are hoping that a lot of schools and parents will bring their kids in.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, this is all the stuff in the show, right?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
I might put that fur coat on because it's really cold in here.
Oh yeah. So well, Reno, the actor playing the wolf, he's a little worried about that because he's got a lot of
Body sweat.
he's got a lot of movement.
Right.
And he's got to dance in that, and that's not that's very warm.
Okay. I would talk about Red Riding Hood all day, but we're here to talk about you, Thomas.
Yeah.
You mind if I read your bio in front of you?
For it.
Thomas Lim was formerly PLAYWRIGHTS' Associate Artistic Director for Youth and Education. He received his training in applied drama and is an experienced drama educator. But he's also a prolific playwright and a director. He has worked extensively with secondary schools and junior colleges, writing plays, designing curricula, directing and producing school musicals, and his plays on youth issues such as stress management have toured around schools in Singapore. I really love to talk to you a bit more about your work with young people. It sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
Thomas made his professional debut as a playwright and director with Grandmother Tongue, which you can see on the title, on the cover of this book over here, at the Singapore Theatre Festival in 2016, which was nominated for Best Original Script and Production of the Year at the 2017 Straits Times Live Theatre Awards, one of the most significant theatre awards in this country.
The only.
Thomas's other plays include Straight Acting, National Day Charade, and Supervision, all for PLAYWRIGHTS. And in fact, we're here primarily to talk about Supervision today, and we'll get to that later in the chat. And that's running 27th March to 12th April 2025 at the Nian Gongxi Theatre here at Funan.
Yeah.
So Thomas Lim,
Yeah.
there's something that we are going to ask all the playwrights who come on, but like, what first drew you to playwriting as a form?
I mean, I actually didn't start out wanting to be a playwright. It was part of my job that I had to write plays.
What was the job?
So I was drama educator. So it's the kind of external vendor that you go into different secondary schools and you do drama clubs, take the drama clubs to SYF, racial harmony day performances, those sort of things. And so as part of it, I found myself in a position where I had to write very, very short plays. SYF was like 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And then you have the school performances, which were much shorter. So I actually kind of started out with the intention to become a director. Playwriting just came as a part of it. Yeah, so I kind of fumbled my way into it. Yeah.
But when you did find it, right, like what about it clicked in your brain and made you go, oh, this is actually something I'm good at or that excites me? What was it? Do you feel like that first pulled you into the form?
I think it's really just kind of that adventure of kind of going into a space where it's unknown. Because as a director, you have something to work with. And, you know, and everything kind of begins with the text. But the playwright has nothing to begin with. You know, the playwright starts from a blank page, and you have to kind of find a way to put what's in your brain onto the page, and there's no one to kind of sound off. It's a very sort of lonely process.
And it's quite a mysterious process.
It is.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. You never know what you're gonna find. You know, you write, and then you realize, actually that's not what my character wants to do, and then you have to see whether or not you listen to the character or
the preset structure.
Correct.
Are you a planner, or are you quite improvisatory on the page?
So I do plan, but the process for me is kind of like, the moment I begin to kind of notice certain things that are interesting in my life, there's this like container that kind of forms in my head, and then as I go about just living my life, it becomes this vessel in which I might hear something. It's like, hey, that kind of fits into this container. And then so it fills until at a certain point, I think when I know I have a play is when there is a substantial amount of stuff in it.
Yeah.
And then I do plan. I kind of take all those things out. I like to use little post-its and just move things around.
Right.
So I'll just write one post-it is one scene, or one post-it is a line that I want to put in. There's something about moving things physically that really helps me when I'm structuring it.
Yeah.
Before I write.
I really, like, this is the first time I've heard anybody use the kind of container, or it's almost like a kind of folder on your desktop kind of thing, where it's like so it's like the container where your play lives. Is that how you would describe it? Or the idea of a play lives?
The idea of a play.
And then you're just slowly adding to it based on things that you observe or see or read.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. I think about it very often in terms of like things in my brain that light up, right? When I read something in the news or I see something or an image, right, it lights up, and there's a certain kind of like tone color it has in my head that I know belongs to this play that I'm cooking, even though I don't know what the play is yet. So it feels like very similar, actually.
Yeah. I feel it almost wants to kind of reach a critical mass before you know you have a play. And sometimes you have multiple containers going, but not everything will fill up.
And at what point do you start writing? When someone asks you to.
When I have a deadline. But I'm also in a phase where I'm kind of trying to write before the promise of a production. Because I feel like sometimes, you know, I wonder what kind of writer I'll be without the promise of a production and where that process might take me. So I'm really kind of leaning into the things that, like you said, like really kind of light up in my head a little bit, and just see where it goes.
That's interesting, because obviously, you know, until recently you were here at the company, and you know there was, you know, you had access to production in a way, right, where it was, you know, you had a slot, or it was part of your job actually to deliver plays, and so there was always this kind of trajectory for your ideas, right?
Yeah.
And then, but now that you're not, there's a bit more ambiguity about whether a play might go on.
Yeah. But I kind of enjoy kind of that quality a little bit, where, you know, it's something. It's kind of like it's a project that I have to nurture with no promise of it becoming anything.
Do you feel like this like makes these projects feel more kind of urgent and precious a little bit, like that? And not to say, obviously, that the work you do when there is a trajectory is less, you know, less something or less anything, but it feels quite special, I think, to know this is a play I really have to write.
Yeah, and also it is a play that, I mean, these are ideas that have not seen the light of day yet.
No one's heard the proposal.
Correct.
It's really very personal to you.
Yeah, so the relationship I have with these ideas are very different from the ones that are like, for example, if I have to write a play for children to come and watch, for example, those are very set. You see, you know where it's kind of going to go. these ones, yeah, I haven't told anyone about it. So yeah.
Yeah, but how do they feel living in your head? Like, how do you? I was like, do they feel different than the place that have a very clear path ahead of them?
Most definitely, it feels like there is less of an external force or external forces kind of influencing the look and the feel of the show and how it sounds.
Right.
It's purely whatever that I'm observing, I'm seeing, I'm experiencing.
Yeah, like the nerdy part of my playwright brain is asking, does that have a bearing on form for you? Like, does it give you permission to think of the play in forms that you have not yet explored, or slightly more experimental forms? Or, does it open up this question for you that it doesn't actually have to look like a naturalistic play, or doesn't have to look, so yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Because it's like, there's no pressure of production. So it's like I can play. I can play with the form, I can play with style, I can do things that I don't have to be at a stage where I'm thinking about the money of it, the numbers of it, and
Yeah,
whether or not it will
how many
sell.
people are going to be in the play?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can have as many characters as I want.
Can I have these people fly in or not?
Yeah, and then they just come in for one scene and that's it. And
Yeah.
that's that. And but when you think about the practical considerations of it, that's not gonna happen.
I really do love this thing of like, when I teach playwriting, right? And then like, I used to tell people like, you should be very economical with the bodies on stage. And if you have someone come in just for that one part, right? You really got to ask yourself, have you earned it? But nowadays, I'm just like, I really love the theatricality of a character or an actor coming in for just one scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that really, really electrifying. And I encourage all playwrights to,
Yeah, do it.
right? Yeah, just cast that one actor who walks in at the end and changes everything, right? Yeah.
Because how many plays can you have that's like 5 or 6 actors? It almost feels like the configurations are, the plays we are seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 5 to 6 is quite expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
What aspect of craft do you enjoy the most?
Wow. Can I start with what I hate?
Yeah, please.
I hate writing the first draft.
Oh yeah, girl. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's the one where, yes, it's like you don't know where it's going, and there's a little adventure you're kind of going on, but it's an adventure with so many blocks along the way, and a lot of times for me the first draft is really kind of getting the ideas on the page without necessarily having the time to kind of edit or think about the lines, think about what I'm setting up for later on, and I don't like reading my first drafts.
Right.
Just because it's more for me an ideas draft. I really enjoy rewriting it because it almost feels like I have something to shape. My sort of dislike for my first draft helps me to kind of see what's not working and yeah.
Right. That's interesting. There's a lot of wisdom around first drafts, right? Yeah. What wisdom? What first draft wisdom do you have for some of the writers who might be listening in?
I think so. I've learned not to be very strict with not editing because editing is a very different process.
As in while you're writing the first draft.
Because editing is you think about what works, what doesn't work. It's a process of kind of breaking down rather than construction. And when when you toggle between the two, you get very stuck. Well, at least I get very stuck because then if something doesn't work, I don't move. And I feel like I need to move and finish before I can see the whole picture.
It's almost that thing of like it was once expressed to me by in this masterclass that I took, where you need to shut down the part of your brain that is telling you suck.
Yes.
And that part of your brain is very alive during the writing of a first draft because there's so much that is unknown and mysterious, and that part of the brain is just constantly stopping you from writing, when actually the goal of the first draft is to not stop in a way, right? To just come up with the full vomit of how it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if that's the part you hate the most, then what aspect of the craft do you enjoy the most?
So in the rewriting phase, sometimes I move things around, right? And then there are moments where characters surprise me because now I've gone through a first draft with them. So certain characters at certain points, it feels like whatever that I've put on the page does not feel genuine, and it doesn't feel like something they would or a decision that they would make. And then I will have to kind of rethink, the whole trajectory of the play from that point onwards. So it's moments like that I really enjoy kind of stumbling upon. Yeah.
What about it? Like, do you enjoy the surprise, the fact that it feels like something is alive and out of your control a little bit, right?
Yeah, because then the character becomes like it's almost like I have to kind of connect with the character and almost like in conversation with the character. So I have to do a lot of what I do is I kind of write from the voice of the character, but these are not things that will end up in a play. So I need to kind of figure out exactly what is going on with them in this particular moment that makes this choice or this action or this line like not genuine in that moment before I can fix it.
That's a really great tool. Can you say a bit more about that? So you do like some kind of scratch writing outside of the play where you kind of throw the characters into a scene that you know is not going into the play.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, sometimes it does lah, but most of the time, it could just be free writing of this character's state of mind, and it's just stream. I just don't stop writing. 5 minutes, I just write. Usually by hand. I find that when I'm figuring things out that require a little more care, something about holding a pen in your hand and on the paper just slows down the brain and kind of matches the writing speed with your thinking speed.
Yeah, that is interesting.
When you type, it's just, you can type and your brain can just go.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just requires a slower process.
Yes.
At least for me.
Yeah, because every time I go for these like writing workshops and stuff, and whenever there's automatic writing, right, they always insist bring in pen and paper. You can type if you want, but it's less ideal. And I never kind of like thought too deeply about it because I agree. I when I do free writing and I do those exercises, I always kind of work paper and pen. But it's interesting to think about the tempo of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that maybe plays live in the tempo of thought that is quite human. And if the minute you start typing it out, it becomes a bit like internet already.
Yeah.
And then it's a different tempo.
Yeah.
I really love this scratch writing exercises you do. Do you have any other sort of like exercises you do while you're exploring you're exploring character or exploring any aspect of your play? Are there other tips and tricks that you employ?
Besides free writing, I would kind of take combinations of characters. I don't know where I heard this from, but I found it very useful, especially I think for supervision because there's 3 characters in there. So with 2 characters, there's only one relationship that you're playing with.
Yes.
But with 3, it's not 3 relationships.
Yeah, there's a few permutations, right?
7 relationships. And I think with 4, it becomes 25, and it's just compound.
I love that you've done the maths.
I've memorized it. but so it's just a matter of, I think, kind of thinking about, if structurally, right? So if these 2, if characters A and B meet in scene 1, then I try and play with who meets in scene 2 and scene 3. So I change it up. And then when just by nature of the combination of characters, they reveal different parts of themselves. Because if I were in a room with someone who is paying my salary, it'll be very different if I'm in a room with someone who is a colleague. And just putting them in those situations itself, whether or not it ends up in a play, will give me a lot of sort of insight to the character, and I think make me feel a little, kind of have a better picture, a better sense of the character.
Right.
And that will help me later on.
Yeah, because like, there's all sorts of inflections that happen, right, based on who you're talking to. Actually, it changes the way you speak. It changes your language. It changes how comfortable someone is in that space also.
Yeah.
I love it when you watch a play and there's 2 people talking, and then suddenly a third character comes in and the whole scene is changed. And those moments always feel really theatrical to me, like the entrances and exits of characters. It's one of like the oldest tricks in the book, right? I think your plays, what strikes me about them is that like they are very grounded in character, and I guess it makes a lot of sense hearing you talk that you actually do spend a lot of time, in their head, under their skin, in their voice, right? How did you kind of learn how to do this? So did it come with practice, or how do you develop this sense for a character?
I think it comes from a curiosity of people. I like to just observe. On everywhere I go, on the public transport, even within the lifts, I'm kind of just listening to what people are saying, what are some of the things that they're going through, some of the, and some of the things are so small, but it kind of speaks to a bigger. Then I wonder, how did you come to think like that? Yeah, so I guess it's a curiosity, it's an observation, curiosity, and then just a wondering after that. And yeah, I mean, naturally I'm an introvert, so I actually listen a lot more than I speak. And you learn a lot about people when you know are listening.
So basically you kaypoh lah.
Yeah, if you want to put it that way, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Let's talk about Supervision a little bit. So Supervision is a play that we are staging, actually restaging. So when was the first time it went out at Wild Rice?
It premiered 2018 Singapore Theatre Festival.
Can you remember 2018? Oh my god.
That was a whole lifetime ago.
Universe
Yeah.
ago. Yeah. Before the Great Trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2018 at the Theatre
2018.
Festival.
That was at LaSalle.
Right, at LaSalle. Correct, I can remember this. It's collected, for those of you who are watching, in this... Sorry, I've exposed the pencil
stand
sharpener.
behind.
Sorry, this is such a rabak podcast. I don't even know how to describe it. To those of you who are not watching, you think this is super polished, but hey. It's collected with Grandmother Tongue, another one of Thomas's really great plays in this double collection that Wild Rice released last year.
Last year, yeah.
So rather than me talk about what the play is about, maybe could you give us a kind of rundown on what you think Supervision's about?
Yeah, sure. It kind of centers around three characters, and to me, I see all of them quite equally. One is a foreign domestic worker from Indonesia. It's her first time here. One is an elderly man who's suffered quite a major stroke, needs help, and
he's wheelchair bound, right?
Yeah. Well, he can walk a little bit, but he does require a wheelchair most of the time. And then there's his daughter, who's kind of his primary caregiver in the sense where she's setting up all the things that he needs in order to live alone. So, he doesn't want to kind of trouble them by living with them, so he still wants to stay at home. And all the things that kind of happen around this idea of the daughter kind of supervising the care of her father through Yanti, the foreign domestic worker.
Right. So spoiler alert to some of our listeners who maybe don't know the play or don't know what it's about. I mean, we'll probably be talking about some elements of the plot. So maybe if you haven't seen the play and you don't want to spoil anything, this is where you would dip out and come back again after you've seen the play. But if you don't mind spoilers, also this play has been out since 2018. Right? Yeah. I think it's gone past the spoiler threshold already.
I think so, yeah.
Screw it. Let's talk a little bit. I mean, I read the play for the first time in preparation for this recording, and I actually not seen a production of it because I was away when it was first produced. So I'm really excited to see it. It's a really harrowing play, Thomas. Like, it's so brutal and contained and claustrophobic, and it really exposes, I think, a lot of the cruelties that are built into these kind of employer-employee dynamics. But there's also a kind of tenderness to it with the way this kind of gentle friendship builds, right, between the old man and the helper. Yanti is her name.
Yeah.
And his name is, remind me? Tek, right?
Yeah.
Tek and Yanti develop a kind of like alliance against the kind of tyrannical Jenny, who, spoiler alert, installs CCTV cameras to kind of supervise
And watch
over the household, because she wants to exert a kind of control over both the lives of Tek and Yanti.
Yeah.
And it's really, really kind of like grotesque, I think. So, what drew you to what's the container that was in your head that you were filling up as you were writing this play? Why did you write it?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
It started with a very personal experience of stepping into my grandmother's house once, one Sunday afternoon. And my grandmother was in a similar state to Tek. Although she was a lot more progressed at that point, she was bedbound. And I recall this image, and I think that's where the container formed, of my auntie kind of installing the camera. So it was a Sunday so that the domestic workers were out, right? And so while they were out, she was adjusting the cameras at the corner of the living room. And the whole sort of feed, so it's connected to the living room TV. So I saw the feed as she was adjusting it to make sure that she could capture all the areas. And they were discussing things like, where the blind spots are and things like that. There was one in the kitchen, there was one in my granny's room, all around the house. And I remember this feeling of like a camera pointing at me. And I just shifted the way I sat. And like, I mean, I'm very sensitive to being on this side of the camera. And so like, I just felt a discomfort, even though I knew what I guess their intentions were. Because most of the week, the care arrangements was that my grandparents would be taken care of by the foreign domestic workers. Whereas their children, they have their own homes, my mom and all, they're all not living in that household. So that's their way of kind of just making sure that things happen. Later on, I also found out that I don't know if they upgraded the system or it was there all along, but there's an app on your phone, right?
Oh God.
That you can see the feed, plus you can turn on the mic and you can speak into it. And then the camera there will kind of beam in whatever is like, hey, why are you doing this? And then that made me so uncomfortable. And then I went online and I realized it's common practice.
Where did you go online to? As in some kind of like employers forum, is it?
So I mean, it's like those like Hardware Zone, EDMW kind of forums where people are like, kind of sharing how they monitor. And then some of them, I mean, it's been, sometimes you see in the news where some of these footage comes out where it's like some evidence of some kind of abuse in either direction.
Either direction, yeah.
And yeah, so this is like, it's very common practice. There are some rules around it. I found out as I was kind of writing the play, but there are ways to circumvent it, and it's
circumvent the rules, you mean?
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, I was weird. There has to be a kind of like law against filming people against their will.
Yeah, because you're not supposed to install it in their rooms, which they rest in.
Or the toilets.
Yeah.
Which is, so in the play it emerges that the toilets are also being filmed, which was like really upsetting.
Yeah, and so how they circumvent it is that instead of putting it in your room, I put it outside the room, but I point it towards your room. So you can still see what's happening inside. Yeah.
And this, as Jenny, the character, articulates it, this need to supervise comes from a kind of, I think, racist paranoia about like, and very class-based paranoia.
Absolutely.
What these helpers, these domestic workers get up to in the house, right? Because like all it takes is a couple of like scandalous cases in the news about like theft or physical violence to kind of like make everybody tar this entire demographic of people with the same suspicion. And so Jenny articulates a couple of times. In fact, the first scene is a really powerful scene where she's just going through these things, right? So it comes from this like suspicion of this foreign body in the house as fundamentally untrustworthy. And yeah, I think the play does a lot to kind of give voice to that character in a way that I found quite empathetic and quite balanced, actually. I mean, she's a horrible person, but like, she articulates in a couple of like quite persuasive moments like where this paranoia comes from. So I thought, yeah, it's very interesting where the kind of dynamics you're playing out.
Actually, the thing about the paranoia is, I remember in 2018 when we were kind of workshopping the play in the rehearsal space, I can't remember who was sharing that actually a lot of this paranoia comes from the agencies. So some agents might tell you to be careful. These are the things you need to do. These are, you have to check their bags before they go out, come in. They'll give you an SOP to kind of follow so that, you don't lose your $5,000 deposit or whatnot. Or, yeah.
Right. I think this play, well, can you tell me a little bit about the reaction to this play when it first went out in 2018? What was kind of like the conversation around it? How were people responding to it? And what stuck with you about people's reaction to the play?
I think a lot of I heard from a lot of people who were in Jenny's situation.
So the employer's situation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Where they were kind of caught between taking care of either a parent or a grandparent while they have to go and work, or while they cannot be in the same household. And I think they felt a sense of kind of resonance to Jenny's experience, where you're basically sandwiched, right? If you want to if your parent or grandparent doesn't want to go to a home or be institutionalized, then you have two options. Either you hire help or you do it yourself. But then we know that if you don't work and you are the one taking care, you're the primary caregiver, then that causes another set of problems. So you're kind of caught between, two evils, and what do you do in that case? So I think the main sort of thing I got was some kind of resonance, not necessarily once. I've had people come up to kind of explain to me why they do it.
Actually, I install these cameras because it's cannot trust them one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So some people came out basically as like tyrants.
Yeah, in a way.
Sorry, I was interrupting.
No, but yeah. So those were the interesting sort of reactions to it. Yeah.
It's interesting, right, when you write these like slightly villainous characters and then someone comes up to you and says, actually, she's correct, what?
Yeah.
And it's very exposing, I think. And I think that's what I like about this play. I feel like it doesn't, like, it's very easy to kind of read Jenny as a kind of monster. And in many ways, her behavior is monstrous. But there was this one interaction in the play where when Yanti finally confronts her about the cameras, where she's like, I don't see what's wrong with setting, with me installing all these cameras, and Yanti just appeals to her humanity. It's like, I'm a human being. And that does not register with Jenny at all, which I think is also really telling of the way a lot of Singaporeans, I think, view foreign domestic workers. Whether they're working in a home or on the construction site, right? There's just this inability to compute that these are people who are human beings. They can, and we'll treat them in the most kind of like denigrating ways.
And it's very strange because, so another response that I got, which I found very, very strange, was that some of them, after coming out or watching the play, then I heard certain, not up to me, but it's as they're walking out, I kind of hang around.
You're hiding in a
I hang around and listen to the audience, right? And I think some of them, might be younger ones, it comes, you hear things like, oh, I learned that they are human too.
Oh, good grief.
But then then does that mean that before you kind of encountered this story that they weren't? Yeah.
Geez. See, I really feel, right, that so theatre that plays that have a kind of social conscience or have a kind of political gesture built into them, right? I feel like it's really upsetting when people come and have to be educated about very baseline things. It's like, no, you shouldn't be coming to a play expecting to be taught that foreign domestic workers are human beings too. It's like entry level. Yeah. And it's very upsetting to think that some people really need theatre to do that kind of education for them, which makes you think, where isn't the education happening?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was my thought, because then what is the perception that is, or the relationship, that is being sort of inculcated into how we as Singaporeans relate to the foreign workers within our midst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But dramaturgically, it's that thing of, if baseline you don't think of these people as human beings deserving full dignity, then it takes you a while to get into the play, because you're just like, why is she so upset about being supervised correct? What, know? And then like it's that thing where reading the play, I was kind of like brought into the full three-dimensionality of all the characters very early on. But imagine if you come in thinking one of them is not a human being. Jeez.
Must have been a rough ride for them.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for these people. I guess I had a question about the form very briefly, right? Because I noticed the scenes are really short, and I was really like taken by how quick the scenes were, and they get you to a moment of like high tension, and then they pull out. And in quick succession, there's something very brutal about this kind of formal arrangement. It feels like you're getting like 1,000 cuts almost, right? It's kind of opposite of that other form of realist writing, where you kind of let the scene draw out and breathe for quite a while and then have various crests and falls. It's like there's this very quick succession of short, brutal, painful scenes. And so I was kind of wondering, like, if you had any, if that was the kind of like way you knew the play would unfold, or how you came about like this structure.
I think it was partly to do with when I kind of started thinking about it, that I wanted it to be just in the same room.
Right, so single location.
Yeah, and so as I was writing it, it felt very, in a way, suffocating, because it's so like you don't get to see the outside, you don't get out at all, and in a space where you don't have that, and it's not just for Yanti, it's also for Tick, who doesn't have that alone space, time to yourself. Then it's just, you don't have the space to go and process these also, you know. Even when in moments of where, I think there was a moment where Yanti kind of couldn't hold it together in one of her first few days. She only has her room to kind of process that. And that, to me, felt like not just a spatial thing. And so I guess that's, I didn't make a conscious decision for the scenes to turn out like that, but I think it was that experience of, oh, this feels a bit suffocating.
It's like, so the temporal experience of it actually is more like Groundhog Day. It's like just the same thing over and over again, the same people, the same location, the same claustrophobic sense. Yeah. This actually leads me to my next question, which is like, so Tate obviously is the other major player here. So he's the elderly man who has had a pretty major stroke, right?
Yeah.
And if there's something really interesting about how I think he's coming to terms throughout the play with exactly how disabled he has become, and he's learning in the play how dependent he's going to be on a total stranger. And I think that's his kind of journey, right? Where it dawns on him like, oh, this is my life now. There's something very horrific about that. And something about what you're saying about claustrophobia and this Groundhog Day structure that feels like he can't even escape from like the terms of his own life anymore. That is very horrific. So my question, my observation rather than question was that it feels almost like you have there's something interesting about this play as a domestic play, right? And we, in Singapore we see a lot of domestic plays set domestic drama, and it's very interesting. We probably spend like a while talking about like the domestic drama as a genre.
Yeah.
But there's something about this play that feels like you've taken the domestic and turned it into a horror, like into a side of horror. It feels almost like I read it as a horror play. I don't know if that's how it was staged or how people received it, but I felt like I was in hell, and the characters are all in a hell of their own making. I just thought I'd offer that.
Yeah, I mean, it Take as a character, while there is some kind of inspiration I took, or some from the observations of my grandparents, was also partly kind of my fears of growing old. Because I don't think we have answered the question of what happens when, or we haven't really thought about what happens when you grow old.
As in, politically, socially,
individually? Yeah, just as I think our structures are not in place, for what's going to happen when we get old, when we age, when, illness strikes. Because I think it used to be that you kind of expect that you get married, you have children, and then they will take on the burden. But I think that's kind of changing. And, a lot more old people and the elderly, they are kind of living alone. And yeah, it just comes from a place of fear of like, okay, then what's going to happen? If I don't want to be institutionalized, what are the options available to me? And honestly, at this point, there isn't many. Yeah.
And I guess like the hope of the play seems to be, if we all treated each other with care, and if we all treated each other with some level of dignity, it might be okay. But it will be hell if you install cameras in the house to supervise another human being as if they were an animal and treated them like they were beneath dignity.
But in a way, I can also see how the installation of cameras, I mean, the employment of foreign domestic workers for elder care and the installation of cameras to kind of monitor them as like things you kind of add on because you don't have a proper solution for things. You know, it's like I just within that moment, I have to solve this problem of taking care of my father or grandfather, and therefore I hire someone.
Yeah.
And then I have to go and solve the problem of how do I manage that.
Because it's twofold, right? Like the installing of the cameras is a violating act if you're thinking about it from a privacy point of view, but it's also in this weird way an act of care because it's like I need to know what's happening when I'm not around. What if you fall?
Yeah.
You know, or like, yeah, what if you slip and fall, you burnt your hand while cooking, right? So it's that, and you're right, I think it points to how there's not a wider infrastructure of care in which we can, I don't know what that is, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's something interesting about this play that's it's a very, what I like about it is that it's a very compressed domestic drama, but it also points out to the kind of society that's holding it, right? It's pointing to a society where there aren't good workable solutions for balancing these kind of hectic careers that we have with the burden of elder care, with the fact that the best we can do right now is outsource a lot of this care to people we are paying far beneath, you know, what is an equitable wage, and that opens up and branches out to its own, like, you know, all this abuse that happens in that space. So it's a play that's pointing outwards, even though it's like, you know, sorry, I dropped my orange. It's a play that it's pointing out, even though it's very compressed. I think that's like what's really exciting about it, and because you see this interaction between Jenny and the father, and you're going, oh, this is an impossible problem. I wouldn't know how to solve it, and I think that's what makes it so hot and dramatic, right? Because you're like, oh my god, I don't know what I would do in that situation. Yeah, we kind of at least hope I wouldn't install cameras to spy on someone, but but would I? Yeah, you see, I think that's the question it's posing to the audience.
Like when you get there, right? Yeah. You can say no now. Yeah. But when you get there, would you be able to be that same person?
Would you?
I don't know. I really don't know. Like, yeah, because I mean,
you heard it here first. Playwright of Supervision does not know if he won't install cameras to spy on his domestic helper.
Because I mean, I'm also, my parents are aging or getting older, right? And I really don't know what will happen when I reach that point.
Yeah. None of us really knows the threshold of monstrosity
that we are capable
of. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a very scary and sobering thought. Because I don't think, obviously, Jenny doesn't think she's a bad person.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Let me try and end this on a slightly more uplifting note.
Sure.
Actually, no. No, I'm not going to end it on an uplifting note. I think there's something very interesting about the idea of like watching that's built into the play, right? Because obviously you've also written this idea of the live feed into the play, and theatre is a watching act. So there's something very implicating about the play, I think, that you're watching someone watch someone else, and then it's making you ask all these questions about yourself as a watcher. It's like, how do I see this person on stage, you know, and where do I place myself in this trio of people? And you don't know, like you said. Yeah. But what do you hope people will kind of walk away thinking about from this new staging of the play? Because a lot of things have changed within the discourse around foreign domestic worker or foreign migrant labor in this country over the past couple of years. I feel like it's a lot more present in the public discourse, and you know, like there have been big scandals that have happened in the intervening years, like Batiliani, I'm thinking about, and so maybe the mood has shifted. But I don't know, where do you see the play landing in 2025?
I'm not sure, because I mean, I think during the pandemic period, like we experienced this great change in how we related to each other within a household. And I think many families and many households had to kind of rethink their relationships in that sort of way. So I'm actually very curious to find out how this will work post-pandemic, because the last two times we saw it was before, you know, COVID happened, and yeah, because I think now that there were a lot of people who moved out of their houses, and there were these separations of families where it was too much to kind of live in the same space. So yeah, I mean, I hope that this play is kind of a way to kind of look at, or at least invite us to, and I'm excited to kind of do that as well, to kind of see and think about and reflect about how, you know, we are caring for each other or not. And I hope it's also like the 90 minutes is a time that we can all kind of suspend our roles for a bit. Because sometimes we're so caught up in the role, right? If I'm caught up in the role of having to be a caregiver, there are all these decisions that I'm making that maybe we don't have the space to think about. And maybe in that 90 minutes, we can just suspend it a little bit as we watch someone else do it.
Yeah, someone else kind of go through the moral quandary of being a caregiver. That's interesting to think of theatre as a space where you can go in and release yourself briefly from a role you play in life and let someone else play the role for you. Yeah. That's really cool. Should we end it there? I think. Yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas. I really enjoyed that chat.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see the play because I've never seen it before. I'm very afraid that I will throw up because it's so like claustrophobic and horrific. But if you, dear listeners and viewers, would like to catch Supervision, that is happening from, I have the dates down here somewhere. It runs from the 27th of March to the 12th of April 2025 and tickets are available now. See you at the theatre. Bye.
Bye.